We did not have the weather report then, and we still don't have it tonight. But at face value, if I can put that quite literally, the temperatures at State House press room yesterday was soaring. When water and handkerchiefs come to play so repeatedly, it needs no further illustration that it was quite hot in there. Housing PS Charles Hinga sweated it out one house at a time. And the pitch of the housing levy was matched by the tone at the press conference. We have a walkthrough of a heated press conference and that sweaty afternoon at the State House. And breaking his sweat too is former President Uhuru Kenyatta, who hit the political party scene like a guided missile. A last-minute change of venue and a last-minute unleashing of non-party allies turned the Jubilee Party NDC into the grandest reunion party for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition since last year's general election. Uhuru spoke tough, covering everything from a stolen party to stolen goats. Then something in between the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal and the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties is going on. We can't quite figure out what, but we shall give it a try. But tonight there will be no misses on Jamela's memo that addresses the National Police Service and the Children's Department. And the title on the envelope, Do You Really Care for the Children? Sam will be trying to make sense of an education system that creates so much for a job market that absorbs so little. Does it make sense to bite more than we can chew? Kaikai's Kicker invites you to listen in to his conversation with a trusted friend, Njonjo Mue. And on my take tonight, you could just be barking up the wrong tree if you haven't read the rest of the content of the Finance Bill 2023. Provisionally, I warn you of a minefield ahead. The news gang is here.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much and God bless you. And please walk with us on this journey. And by the way, and for whatever you do, please, because you're mainstream media, we are always available. And call us out, please. We're not saying don't call us out. If you don't understand, please do the same thing. Lakini tafadhali, don't be peddlers of fake news. Na wale jamaa wengine mkuwaida huko pia mna balance kidogo. Kwa sababu wanatuchapa huko, then ile kazi ngumu tunajaribu. And because this is for the good of the country. All right? Asanteni sana, God bless you.
All right, so to not be peddlers of fake news, we were actually assisted by having that. How long was the press conference?
Over an hour and 20-something minutes.
Yeah, about an hour, 40 minutes, thereabouts. Ladies and gentlemen, that is where we begin. From that rather animated press briefing, which we carried live from start to finish here on Citizen Television. So, Sam, let me begin with you. What do you make of what transpired, how that was put together? Because, by the way, that press conference was preceded by the Kenya Kwanza PG that took place the day before. That was on Monday at State House, where, you know, the members of parliament were taken through. In fact, it was PS Hinga who took them through all those provisions and the proposals of the housing fund. And then the next day, we hear from the PS.
Right. A very important and defining week it has been, especially for the Kenya Kwanza administration, knowing that the finance bill is getting up to that very important point. It's just about to get to the end of the month. We know the budget will be read on the 15th of June, and thereafter the finance bill rather must be considered with almost urgency, because by 30th of June it has to have been passed and signed into law so that it can be implemented from the 1st of July 2023. Because this is that document that provides the government with an opportunity to collect the revenues that they want to utilize in delivering on the budget, whose, of course, the term begins on the 1st of July. So seeing the president invite the parliamentary group to State House, and I had a conversation with some of them, and they'll tell you that it was this very intense conversation between 7:30 in the morning up until 3 p.m. The president and his team, the PS Charles Hinga, be it Cabinet Secretary Eli Duwalo, of course, talking about some of the programs, the digital economy. But that matter of housing really took much of the time because members of parliament needed to be explained why it is important. And you get the idea that this is something that is very dear to the president, talking about the housing, the affordable housing program that he promised during the campaign. He has said it on several occasions that this is the only way to achieve a situation where you don't have a lot of slums or informal settlement. So that briefing, that responding to questions, the members of parliament raising some of the pertinent questions that have come from the members of the public, and in the end, some of the members of parliament telling you that after that sitting, I am convinced you need to pass it. But then again, you have the principal secretary now taking that responsibility because the House, part of it is convinced. Now it's time to convince. Is it the media? Is it the people? For me, that's 1 hour, 40 minutes. Yes, it was good. It was important for the principal secretary to speak. But I could see him struggle. He even said it himself. The reason why I'm struggling is because you guys don't get it. Yeah. There are some questions that I thought he tried to answer. For instance, the question of what happens after 7 years. Because the act is the bill, rather, it's not yet an act. The bill is talking about after 7 years you can withdraw your money or you can choose to give it to some of your dependents or some of your children or someone who is a member and a beneficiary of the affordable housing, but still confusing, yet revealing, because he says that after the 7 years, there's some money that you're supposed to be receiving, whatever your saving is, but then now getting to the question of indicating that not all of it will be available, which is something that you can listen to from Charles Hinga, number 5.
If you're retiring, if you read what is in the finance bill, it says you get back your money at the earlier of retiring, death, or 7 years. So whichever comes first, you're going to get back your money. So if you retire in 2 years' time, you get back your money, the whatever you've saved. Okay, because it is your money. If you want to get it out, you will get out your portion. The employer portion stays in. Because the employer portion is the one that protects the capital of the fund. So that if now there are obligations for the fund, we are supposed to keep those that kind of money. But after 14 years, you can now exit your employer portion as well, or if you die. So, but if you die or retire, you get both.
I don't know whether it's because...
Make sense of that.
I don't know really. For me to make sense of that?
Help us.
That's difficult because I don't know whether it's the temperature in the room, because when you say that you can take it out, but if you die, you get both. I don't know what that means, but probably it's the moment that hit him, because really it doesn't make sense. Once you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing you're getting. But I think there's a bit of explanation that needs to be done. And the things that you were saying, I don't know that they'll come in the regulations that will be designed thereafter. I don't know why this information was not put in the finance bill. There's the question of saying that the interest rate is silent. I mean, lots and lots of questions why this should not be part of the bill.
Yvonne, when you listen to what PS Hinga was saying yesterday, and the day before that, you had the Kenya Kwanza members of parliament and senators meeting the president in State House, and the main issue on the agenda was this housing fund. But then, is it a case of seeing the spirited campaign by the government to want to have this understood and passed when the bill finally comes before parliament? But is this a case of the government not listening to its people? Because other than government, no one else is really rooting for this 3% housing tax. If you look at the sessions that have been going on about the finance bill that the committee, that the parliament committee is listening to, all those groups that are coming there, those from the tax group, for auditors, ordinary wananchi, those from the border, those running beauty businesses, everyone is talking about how the housing tax will not work and why it would not work. You had Kwame Owino talking about why this would not work and how it would affect people. You had FKE have already spoken about this. LSK speaking about this, talking about how this will not work as it is, that the government should find alternatives to trying to raise money to build houses. Yeah. But then now it's really being almost literally shoved down people's throats with what is going on. And that press conference that was supposed to have given clarity to what the housing fund really is and answer all the questions that are being raised, did not do that. Instead, it raised more questions about what it was all about. The president wants to create about 1 million jobs from this, talking about how there'll be direct and indirect jobs from building each house. Yeah. The president was also talking about how you should help Mkenya mwenzako by contributing to this fund, but people still don't understand why they need to do it. When someone says, tayari niko na nyumba, sitaki nyingine, ama nishajenga mashambani, because that's what some of the teachers were saying, that they've already taken out loans and already built houses, they don't want another one. It seems like that is not important. So, hatuwasikizi wananchi wanatakaje? Maybe this is what the president wants as his legacy. There are a lot of questions about if you are unable to finish paying or if you default, what happens? But then more questions came out of this press conference than answers, which I think had been the original intention.
Yeah, before we come to you, Linus, I just want us to listen to some of those, because there's also been an issue of, you put in your money, how much do you get out? Is there an interest? And, what do they do with the money in terms of growing it? And it was, what you had said about the interest, and apparently
it's silent.
The whole word, usually a letter in a word is silent, but this one is the whole word that is silent. Let's listen to that.
Interest rate is silent. And the reason why interest rate is silent is because the minute you give guaranteed interest rate, I don't know where you get the guaranteed interest rate, okay? You create an obligation which is almost like a debt, okay? So, even when you join these money markets, where you're for unit trust, they don't give you a guaranteed return, okay? But they keep on reporting and telling you, this is how our fund is performing and so on and so forth. I think every month they show you which fund is doing well or not doing well, all right? Okay? That is the similar principle. What we can talk about is what is our target interest rate, and we can give you that. Our target interest rate is 7%. Okay, that is our target interest rate. And we can achieve it because this money, 9 billion a month, that I only need to pay in 4 years' time, is not going to stay in a simple deposit account. We are going to invest it. We're going to invest your money.
Okay, so suddenly when you go and invest that money, you are given a guaranteed return on that money. Markets change, but then where they're going to invest, they will get a guaranteed return, but they're not able to guarantee the same to those that put the money in there. Linus, you watched it all. Did it answer the questions? Did it raise more questions? Did you come away understanding what the housing fund is all about?
It not only raised questions, it also raised suspicion. There was so much passion demonstrated by the PS for housing, Charles Hinga. He did a good job in terms of the energy and the passion to push through this idea. But then he also showed impatience with our lack of understanding that, you people don't get it. And I think from that alone, government should understand that that's where the problem lies. That when people don't understand, then it will always be a problem. They'll have a problem with it. So it invited suspicion also. Because we have to ask one question now, and every normal Kenyan can raise the same question and say, why is this a do or die proposition? Why is it almost doomsday-like in terms of how it's being positioned?
Yeah.
It has to happen. It's the best thing. We're going to Canaan, pun intended. That this is the direction we are all going to take. It invites suspicion. in terms of communication, and I think the PS himself did admit that the communication is not going on right. And I think it's
during that press briefing.
Press briefing.
Okay.
And it's interesting that he speaks about it in the press conference. That was not going so well, because this needed to have been, and Charles Hinga, his private sector background shows. You know, he fills the room. I could see a PowerPoint presentation. And this is something that he should have been allowed to do. Just put a projector and walk through that, because it'll make your presentation more organized. It'll make you less impatient with your audience, by the way, because you have facts that you are engaging there, even if you think your audience is not picking it at the rate that you would like. I think from a communication point of view, there was a disaster yesterday afternoon in State House in all manner, including even the optics. You know, water, a lot of sweating.
He knocked over his glass twice.
Absolutely, not once, twice.
Yeah.
And countless times on the forehead,
brow,
wiping his brow. And you know, body language readers will tell you maybe your body is fighting with what you're saying, because there's something called body language that maybe your conscience is also boxing you right back. You know, when they do those lie detection tests, they look at your eye movement, for example, and how, whether you're sweating. Actually, sweat is a very bad indication. It's a dead giveaway. It's something that suggests that you are struggling with some of those facts. But in a country, and I would just like us to go to the Mwananchi Vox Pops that were collected randomly today. And I just want us to listen to this for a moment, Robert.
Nataka iwe na second option. Either waseme wewe kama unaitaka utalipa.
Kilimo ipande juu, yani tuinue kilimo juu. Njaa itoke nje. Pesa ipatikane kwa serikali. Ndio housing fund ikuje, kwa sababu tutachangia wote.
Mimi siwezi taka serikali nikate pesa ati ya kujenga nyumba. Juu nyumba ni kitu mimi nimejenga, ninajenga mwenyewe na hustle yangu. Mambo ya serikali kusema ati anijengea nyumba, hiyo ni uongo.
I think you see right there that Kenyans are asking about their own context. This is, where are you coming from and where are we? I mean, how have we lived? And there's something that has been given as a positive, and one of the things that the PS was pointing out as a positive of this housing scheme is that developers will supposedly get free land.
Yeah.
From where?
I mean, look at how our land ownership patterns are. Same government that struggles to get road reserves. You know, if you want to do a dual carriage right now on an existing road, you imagine the headache you go through. The other day, the president spoke of changing the compensation method at the National Land Commission, because one of the primary areas of concern is how corrupt the compensation bit of things is done. Which free land is the government talking about? Government doesn't own a lot of land anymore, because you look at our history, we are a country that really respects private land ownership. That's the bulk. That's how the bulk of the land is owned. If we were in Tanzania, where the government owns all the land, if we were in China, if you were in some of these environments, or even Rwanda, where government has a big say on land use, then you can actually sell that as an incentive to those who are doing housing development. So there are a lot of things that are coming up as questions that do not pass the basic test. And you look at those people who are speaking in the street, and we like saying in Kenya, I'm not mad. I think those people are also saying, we're not mad. We know about this. Housing is not really a priority.
Yvonne, before you come in to something Lennox has just said, when he talks about the land that will be used. Because the government has not really been open about why it has chosen to provide free service land and also the tax exemptions to the developers to build those houses. Because people are thinking, why not build capacity for the national NHC or the Ministry of Housing to do this job so that those funds can properly be audited by the Attorney General? That's one. And two, you listen to the Kenyans speaking. Those we just picked a sample of the ones we spoke to today. There are many more. Yeah. There is suspicion, Yvonne, because they're asking, how will that money be managed? Where will that money go? Because we have a history of poor management of funds. Because now the money that you are using is money that has been deducted from workers. So where is that money going? Because we've seen other schemes or other plans where workers' money have been put at risk. You have pensioners who are still waiting to be paid. Hawajapewa pesa zao wanasubiri. So you're wondering, where will this money go? I know yesterday the PS talked about it going to a specific fund which cannot be touched by government, but exactly who will monitor that money? Pali itakuwa. And when it comes to time of repayment, that process is really, really long. Pensioners kupata hela zao wanateseka. Na hizo hela pia, the ones that are going to contribute to the affordable housing scheme, pia mambo yatakuwa hapo when after the period ends and you want your money back, and you only get your portion. Ile ya mwajiri wako inabakia. Yes.
You know, just to pick up on what you're saying about people trusting government, and I think for me, that's at the heart of the debate that you see right now. Do people really trust government with their money? Do they trust them to do what they say they're going to do with their money? And you can't blame them. You know, just over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have taken a look at scandals. You know, in the country. We haven't had quite a good track record within the judiciary for people who have misused, misappropriated. You know, we like to use very fancy terms, but really the essence is money that has been stolen from the public. We haven't seen too many convictions. NHIF has scandals. That is money deducted from Kenyans. NSSF has had scandals. That is money deducted from Kenyans. One of the most important things, I think, around this, and you can communicate the mechanics. So the issue about, you know, it became quite technical, and because he was animated as well, I feel like the message may have been lost. It's plain and simple. Kenyans want to know, will my money be safe? Will it be used? And has there been a track record, particularly with this one? And those are the things that you need to use to prove to people. So let's talk about, you know, the affordable housing schemes that we have seen. For decades now, there's been an attempt to try and get those out of city council and municipal council houses into, you know, better houses that are more affordable. New Ngara, Old Ngara. There's been a push and pull. Kariako, Racecourse, Pangani. The push and pull has always been that the residents don't trust that they will get the houses. That's number one. They don't trust that they will get the houses at an affordable rate. So remember, for these people who are already vulnerable, which is why they're living in city and municipal council houses that are subsidized, is they can't afford market rates. So there's a housing project in Mombasa where people are paying anywhere up to 5,000 shillings for a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house. There were 500. They were asked to move out. They built 2,000 units. But now when they came in, they're subjected to market rates. So a 3-bedroom house in Buxton is 4.8 million shillings. And just like they're saying with this one, they were required to come up with at least 50% of the amount by the time the houses were ready for occupation. And then they were required then to settle the rest of the 50% within 6 or 12 months. If you do that math, that is way more than what they were paying in terms of the subsidized rent to begin with. That means many of them defaulted, many of them have lost the houses which they were relying on for affordable housing. Houses they didn't own, granted, but were able to live in at an affordable rate. These are many of the instances that we have. Do we trust the government? And one of the things that they can do is allay that fear. So here's another question. If we have been doing affordable housing, right, under Boma Yangu, and you know, all of these other projects that have been coming in, we've had that project, right, without the 3%. So what do we need the 3% for?
A lot of explanation Obviously, coming from the set of government and leaders within it, they're talking about now sort of extending it, expanding the access. And if you look at the figures, you might want to believe it, because if that is implemented, if the finance bill becomes low as it is, and those employees start making their contribution, the PS is saying that they'll be collecting 9 billion shillings every month. In a year, that's 108 billion shillings. In 7 years, that is 756 billion shillings, or in other terms, 0.756 trillion shillings. That's a lot of money in the hands of who now? A fund manager who'll be in the private sector.
Yeah.
So first of all, if we're having challenges, like you said, the funds that are already existing managed by agencies that are appointed or established by acts of parliament, the membership there appointed by either the president or the cabinet member responsible, what then would it mean for an organization that has been identified, or organizations that have been identified by people in government to manage a fund? So you see, that's several layers of reporting. Because yes, PS Hinga says you not have access.
Yeah.
But do you believe that? Because there are no regulations to explain what you're asking. The finance bill does not explain it. How are you going to appoint that fund manager that will be responsible of overseeing the management of the 9 billion shillings every month, or if you like, the 756 billion shillings in 7 years, which will have accumulated interest? The target is 7%. You can imagine how much that is.
Yeah.
So I was hoping that Charles Hinga would close the argument yesterday. Clearly, that didn't happen. It's still an ongoing conversation, but those answers have to be brought on board if at all this is to be embraced. And of course, with the members of parliament already convinced, I don't know what will change. Even if the public participation continues, more than 1,300 memoranda already submitted, what will change if the members of parliament
have already been whipped?
Already convinced.
Yeah,
and this has really been a big test for Parliament. Parliament is going through a trial because questions are being raised that ought to be raised by a house like Parliament. Anything to do with public funds, whether it's the raising of it or the spending of it, is within the mandate of Parliament to question, to grill, and ask all the important questions on how it works. This week, we had 2 interesting meetings at the State House, Nairobi, and White House in the United States. Similar meetings in terms of the legislature meeting the executive. But a completely different demeanor, world of a difference in terms of demeanor. In the US, House Republican leader met President Biden
on their debt ceiling
to discuss the debt ceiling, meaning it's a negotiated process. And, twice he came out and said, we've had very constructive discussions, but we do not have a deal yet. Now, come many kilometers away to Nairobi, and there's a State House meeting. Photos emerge of members of Parliament taking notes in a very detailed way. I must say, the pictures looked impressive in class terms, at least when it comes to taking notes. They did a lot of that. Where is our majority leader? He should be the voice we are hearing. But the problem here is we think, it's ruling party top down. Majority leader does the bidding of the president, and the ruling party does the bidding of the president. It shouldn't work that way. And even the intention of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was to create institutional independence, and in terms of separation of powers. You are a house that is independent in terms of being the legislative arm of government, very independent in your negotiations and your engagement with the judiciary and your engagement with the executive.
And on behalf of the people.
Yes, that is not coming through. Because if you just sample the reports of what happened earlier in the week, members of parliament from the Kenya Kwanza, ruling Kenya Kwanza side, went to State House to get instructions they say to get a better understanding of the bill. But do they have the option of questioning it openly and in public forums, and especially in the House, because we've seen some of them now posting those short videos from their villages saying, I won't be supporting, and that's because they're listening to the ground. So for Parliament, this is a major test, and it's such a sad story that we are now into our 15th, going into the third term since the new constitution came to place. But we are not seeing an independent Parliament that would engage, for example, the presidency in a conversation of equals, in a conversation of institutions that can checkmate each other. We saw Parliament going to State House as a subservient party in the conversation. And the real test now is going to come when the committee prepares its reports. And I think Sam took us through the legislative calendar earlier. And we will see how they'll vote, whether they'll vote as instructed or they'll vote as an independent house capable of making decisions independently.
And just to add to that, though, so the members of Parliament were taken through this and seemingly instructed on which way to vote. So what is the purpose of everything we're doing right now? Why are we doing it? I think the committee today said they've gotten, what, thousands of memoranda, written memoranda?
1,300.
1,300 as of the deadline, which was
Friday
20th?
20th, yeah.
And we've had 4 days of public hearings where you've heard from as many professional bodies, digital lenders, teachers, manufacturers, private sector, employers, I mean, you name it. So all of this that's happening, to what end? Perhaps we should just get to the point where we say, is this really a waste of our time? I know, Sam, you'd brought this up, in your final word last week, but then we're engaging in this very robust exercise, including now having that press briefing where we're being told you are the people that don't understand it, where even the media was being rallied to advocate and push for the housing fund because it'll be beneficial to everybody, including members of the media. But so the question is there no room for different opinion at all? Because then all this that we're engaging in is just a futile exercise if people are called to State House and told this is the way things will go.
Are we ticking
So why are
boxes,
we here?
Yvonne? And it doesn't help matters for the government when everyone who is speaking before that committee is against this, raising questions about everything, not just the housing fund.
Yeah.
They're talking about how many jobs they will lose, how it will affect their businesses. So almost we focused quite a bit on the housing fund, and I know, Yvonne, on your take today, you'll tell us a bit more of what is contained in that finance bill.
Yeah.
But almost every aspect of it, most of it, that really affects business people, mwananchi wa kawaida, those with the small businesses, is something that all those who are coming before the parliamentary committee are saying this will not work. The government should look for other options to raise its money to finance its budget. And then when you hear members of parliament, like I keep remembering what Member of Parliament Osoro was saying when he said, "Iki kitu tutapitisha," it's like telling people, well, it doesn't matter what you all say or do.
Yeah.
But
Is
we
it
have
government
seen
for the people, by
the people, but we have seen on social media, Yvonne,
Yeah.
some legislators, members of parliament, being clearly told by their people, "Iki tu sio mzuri."
including a member of parliament today, actually, who was before the committee, who said, I am in UDA, but I will not support it. I just want to buttress your point. So the KPA SACCO has raised issues with it. The Digital Lender SACCO, now this is the finance bill in total. Kenya Association of International Schools, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA, the teachers, the unions, the LSK.
The audit companies.
The audit companies. There's a list of them, and all of them are raising issues, not just with the housing fund, but with various aspects of it. Those who are in cement manufacturing were raising issues on that, and the cost of cement, which of course would deal with the housing issue.
Right.
But Sam, it looks like, it's not a making of the media, but these are people who are actually saying it, including members of the public.
I mean, it's remarkable to see the amount of objection that has come from different quarters. And I think there's a conversation that we've not had sufficiently. You're taking 2,500 shillings, not just from me, but my employer. And you didn't ask them. I didn't ask them. there's a way how salaries are raised. I mean, it's awarded by the employer. Now you're forcing an employer to raise a salary for their employee by 3%, and you're taking those resources into a fund to be managed by another private company. So that's sort of what?
Yeah.
Is it revenue for the company? Is it capital for the company? Which at the end of 7 years, the employee takes out their money.
Yeah.
The remainder stays in the account for 14 years, which is money from an employer. I mean, how are you doing that? And then secondly, because the PS was saying that this will not be in the budget of the government, meaning it's not part of public expenditure. What is the housing levy doing in the finance bill? Because the finance bill is meant to look for money to finance the budget or the expenditure plan of the government. So when you put it in the finance bill so that it is passed, you keep insisting it is not a levy. I mean, it's not a tax. It is a saving. What is it doing there? Because the finance bill, squarely, it's about financing the government operations, not raising money to be deposited in a fund manager to build houses for whoever.
And Yvonne, maybe we can listen to one sound bite as we take a break.
Yes.
On the same issue. Maybe we can listen to bite number 8 for a second from the Petroleum Association as we continue.
We are still being cited, or rather being taxed with withholding tax, and it has become a very serious issue. So what we are asking is if the commission, or rather this department, could allow the commissioner the powers to exempt the industry, whereby being in an industry that the margins are really thin, the amount we are withholding is more than what we are supposed to gather.
I'd wanted them to talk about how this will affect their businesses, because there's a point where they say, we will shut our businesses. We're already paying 20% in the form of withholding tax. We are shutting our businesses. And then the Kenya Association of Manufacturers says you lose up to 150 billion shillings, and you may lose up to around 100,000 jobs. That's from KEPSA, owing to the implications from this proposed bill. Yvonne, these are the same people, one, who are paying taxes. Wale wachache ambao wanalipa, if you look at the numbers, those informal employment who pay taxes. 1, 2, ni hawa ambao unatarajia kwamba utawakata 3% for the housing tax for that fund. Na ni hawa ambao sasa watapoteza kazi zao. You need to think about ways of increasing your tax base, but with this, you're reducing the kidogo that you already have. Unataka hizo hela ambao hazikuji. And FKA has already said, why can this thing be voluntary? Why do we have to do it? And questions about whether it's voluntary or not voluntary really came up during the press conference yesterday by PS Hinga. And at the end of it all, we still didn't know.
Do you want us to listen to that? Yeah, it's the second one. Sorry, before you come in, Linus, on whether it is voluntary or not. That's, you know, the second bite when Charles Hinga talked about whether this is voluntary or not, whether it's law or not. Is it a tax? Is it a saving? Is it a levy?
Most of you are saying, well, it's voluntary. You see, when it is given by law, if I'm going to get $1 billion a month, it means I can confidently go out there and call investors and tell them, for as long as that law is there, 3 years from now, I'll still be collecting the $1 billion. So let me tell you in simple terms. You know today something called fuel levy. We all pay fuel levy today if you're driving. Fuel levy is the one that has enabled us to build all these roads you're seeing here.
I think, Yvonne, when you look at the number, and Sam, you had gone through the number of public participation documents that have been received, and when you look at the number of people actually, and groups and companies that are talking, look, there's one huge positive aspect about this whole housing levy discussion. For the first time in a long time, we have seen Kenyans stepping forward to discuss something about how they are being governed and an issue that affects them. It's usually very difficult to get Kenyans to be involved in civic affairs. And this is the first time there is a very, very impressive convergence. You saw from the streets of Kitale now to the halls of Parliament, people speaking and somehow the similar language. They did not do this when food prices were going up, when fuel prices were going up. And for the first time, some civic activity is being witnessed. This is very, very encouraging. And though the Constitution actually provides for public participation as a value out of the values of Article 10, by which this country should be governed, Kenyans have rarely taken advantage of that. Kenyans have rarely stepped forward. You know, because in Kenya, people only get concerned about things that touch them at a personal level. But we also realized through the maize crisis, during the drought, that not exactly. Some form of organization also needs to come into place. And we've seen that because business has been touched, and in a big way, by the proposals contained in the Finance Bill 2023. One other point that I really wanted to take note of, and that is the area of employers. Federation of Kenya Employers actually had their presentation, but there's something in the government communication that comes across as almost insensitive or out of touch with how the employer space actually works. You know, I saw the peers talking of, you know, the 2,500 coming from your employer. You know, the impression is created as if an employer somehow gets money from trees or things like that. There is absence of understanding of how the business space actually works. And I think that's the first thing that really, when it comes to the side of employers, that point has to be pushed to government, that they need to have an informed conversation with employers as well, how it actually works. Because the employers you are talking at like that are the employers that withstood the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah. So resiliently,
yes,
actually. Yeah.
Government speaks as if they do not know of things like retrenchments that many companies conducted in this country. Do you actually understand what steps are involved before a company makes that very, very sad and difficult decision of retrenching people? You think it's only 2,500, and say a company is employing over 1,000 employees. Where do you think they're going to get that extra, you're the math guy, sum, 1,000 times 2,500, which is instantly, which is
2.5 M.
2.5 M per month.
Per month.
Yes.
Yep.
So you have to sell
over and above all the other costs in business.
And introduce a new 2.5 M that you take to government to keep for 14 years.
You know, there's another way they can actually accommodate that.
Yeah.
You reduce the number of workers.
Exactly. That's when they start talking of retrenchment and fewer jobs. So there's been a lot of misinformation. I know the PS said that people don't understand on this side, but it's also becoming apparent that that end of the argument also doesn't understand much about the workings of the business space. Businesses in this country are treated so shabbily. They are addressed like children. They are addressed like retards. You don't understand. You know, it's only 2,500 per employee per month. You know what? If you have 1,000 employees, it's 2.5 million extra shillings that you have to submit every month.
Yeah. So there we are. We wait to see what happens. Also important to note that the PS was actually at the public hearings this afternoon and left that session midway in a rather abrupt manner. But, you know, all voices are valid, even the dull and the meek, according to the desiderata. So let's listen to one more as we take a break here on the program tonight.
Upande wa manyumba, nani anakwao? Nani anakwao? Nani anakwao? Nani anakwao?